As part of this week's work, I'd like you to be able to understand the difference between symbolism and allegory. Let's start with symbolism. What is a symbol? A symbol is a word or object that stands for something else. So for instance, if I were to show you this picture, what does that stand for? What idea does that mean? My guess is you've probably already answered that a heart stands for love. A heart is a symbol of love. It is something tangible, something you can reach out and see, that stands for an idea or a concept. Okay, here's another example that's very common. We have the image of the dove. And what does the dove stand for? Dove is often a symbol of peace. And again, these are pretty common examples of symbols, but it's any time we use one thing to stand for something else. So what is an allegory then? First of all, it's important to recognize that an allegory is some form of a narrative, a story. Could be done in the form of a fable, like Aesop's fables were, parables, which you would find in the Bible, poems can be allegories, short stories, pretty much any genre that can take a narrative form. And remember, a narrative has characters and a plot and conflict. And an allegory, its main purpose is to act as an extended metaphor, which that's only helpful to you if you actually remember what a metaphor is. So just as a reminder, a metaphor is when we say that one thing is another. So in this example, I got lost in the oceans of his eyes. I am saying that the eyes are equal, that they are oceans. Now, you and I both know the eyes of this guy are not actually oceans. It's making a comparison between the two. It's just that these eyes are so blue that they remind me of the ocean water and how blue that is. Again, as a reminder, remember the difference between a simile and a metaphor, because they're very similar, is that a simile would use the words like or as. A metaphor does not. It says that one thing is another. So in the example, once again, his eyes are oceans of blues. Oceans. Excuse me. And remember, the color is what made that connection. It's important to remember that an allegory is actually a story that has two meanings. It first of all has its literal meaning. That's the actual storyline, the characters and the plot. The characters doing this, this, and this. All of these things happen, just like any other story that you would read. But it also has a figurative meaning. So each of those characters symbolize or stand for something else. Each of the events that happen to those characters are not just events, but they're also something more. They stand for something else. So you can read an allegory on one level, which is a very basic literal level of these are some characters and this is what happens, but then you also need to read allegories on a figurative level. And to do that, you need to recognize what each of those characters stand for and what each of those events stand for. So what's the difference between symbolism and allegory? An allegory is a complete narrative, a complete story. But symbolism is smaller, and the meaning can change. So just because at the beginning of the work, an item or a word is symbolizing something else, that doesn't mean that by the end of the work it's going to symbolize the same thing. It can change. You can have a work that has many, many different symbols, different things that are symbolic. Whereas an allegory, it's going to kind of follow the entire pattern throughout. And once you've figured out what each piece is symbolic of, so what each character is symbolic of, what each event is symbolic of, you can track that throughout the whole piece and it will stay consistent. It will stay the same. So I think kind of allegory as the big thing and symbolism as very small pieces. And of course, why should you care, since we always need to know that? Because this week you're reading John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, and it is an example of an allegory. So you need to understand as you're reading this story, and again, that's John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, that each character and event happens on the literal level, but each character and event also stands for something bigger. And of course, you need to submit some question answers to get credit for this. So if you could just write the answers to these questions in your submission block and go ahead and submit them, that's how you'll get credit for this assignment. As always, if you have any questions, please call, email me, or let me know in some way. Thanks.